discuss this. So Camille, when you joined, we were discussing the MR that we're discussing dog fooding asynchronously.
Yep.
So it seems like there's two different paths right now, Unleash and Flipper. And we're kind of going two parallel paths here. On the one hand, most of our developers are using Flipper via the ChatOps project. And on the other hand, our team is developing the Unleash solution, which we're offering for customers. And I feel like we should be trying to get more teams on board for dog fooding the Unleash solution, since that's what we're offering. And I know that Chinya had some performance concerns about Unleash. We talked about some of the pros and cons of both approaches. So on the one hand, Unleash has an advantage because it supports a lot more languages than Flipper. Flipper is Ruby, which is the majority of the development in GitLab, but it's not a good enough solution to offer others because it's not multi-language. And Unleash supports more languages than Flipper, but there's some performance concerns. So the question is can we start? Is there anything blocking right now from using Unleash in the first place? Because Unleash does support Ruby. And then maybe trying to fix the performance issue as we stumble upon them.
Can you open the issue? Can you share your screen? I just summarized why it's difficult to switch over in the issue.
Okay. So here is the issue.
Yeah, it's bottom. Can you scroll to the bottom? Yeah, so can you little bit go up, scroll up?
No more. No more.
Yeah,
Wow.
so the point 3. Yeah, so like this is brief summary, architectural summary that I try to explain that like anyone, literally anyone can understand. So like at the last part, you can scroll down why it's so hard. So like we are talking about performance concern a lot, but what exactly it is? That's your question, right?
Yes.
Like there are many questions. So I summarized it there once more again, and then like so these are things we need to tackle. We need to resolve.
So let's start. Let's just go one by one and see if we have any mitigations. Obviously, this is an effort, and this is going to be there's going to be some trade-off on development time, right? So we don't need to go into that. We know that the situation. So the first one is a rough estimate. There will be between 1,500 and 2,000 threads in production for polling, and I assume this is the clients polling the server, saying like who am I? What flag do I get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had talked about different solutions. At the moment, there's a few questions. One, is 1,500, 2,000 polling events that bad? Like how many feature flags do we actually have right now that we can say that this is a problem with active clients that are actually polling? That's question number one that we need to figure out. You don't have to answer it. I'm just going to raise the question. Question number two is that we figured out this isn't the smartest thing to just have a set duration of polling. And we talked about a few solutions. One of them was like an incremental polling mechanism. So maybe it starts at 15 seconds and then it goes to 30 seconds and then to a minute. So you don't have everyone polling at the same time. And another option that Chase had talked about was WebSockets. Yes. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. Web something?
Yep. WebSockets or some other kind of different, that is not a polling mechanism, but is more push-based. as like an alternative to that. I mean, there's other things we can do inside this particular problem, right? Caching. But I think like the thing that I'm kind of coming around to is like, well, this is a big change to if we have to do this, right? If we have to go through and update the clients to all the client libraries for Unleash, that's now our problem. They're like the GitLab vetted version of those client libraries. And it's like, okay, that's fine. We just need to then account for that effort, right? Of how we're going to do this and which ones do we support. And then we say, thank you for using GitLab feature flags, but you can only use the Python library now because that's the only thing we've updated, right? Or whatever, right? Or maybe there's a phase solution where you can have polling for a certain amount of time, but we deprecate like the usage of those over time somehow. It's not, I don't know that it's necessarily cut and dry like that.
I just wonder if you add more colors on this, that Unleash is basically not maintained by us. Unleash clients as well. These client libraries are created by someone else and we do not own it, which means we don't have control. So like, even if we said like, hey, we want to make this performant and like we want to re-architect it, everything, that doesn't mean that their maintainers, unless the actual maintainers say yes. So we have to communicate with them and like who's going to maintain the actual official Unleash schema or like the actual protocol that the polling based thing. So we don't have control here because it's not owned by us.
But
okay,
yeah.
I'm like a few thoughts from me. Like,
Okay. Please.
the Unleash backend, my initial thought was to use Rails because it was the easiest. But I always anticipated that Unleash, though its architecture is not performant, and I always anticipated that at some point we just move the API into something more performant, where amount of the requests, some kind of resiliency is not an issue anymore. I'm not saying that we should be doing that, but I'm kind of thinking that one way to approach that is like have Unleash API backend to be living as a separate service, separate microservice that customer can deploy and use our API. I mean, it doesn't have to be Unleash, it could be our API, but have this kind of like backend API for Unleash be separate from GitLab Race. GitLab Race is not performant. Then a lot of these concerns about amount of the requests, they are not really like concerns anymore, because if you deploy this microservice on your infrastructure, this microservice can ask like even every second GitLab, but it's gonna be 1 request per second versus 20,000 requests per like 1,000 requests per minute, because it would be caching. Like the content that you are storing is highly cacheable. But the second aspect is like the resiliency. Like the Race builds like very strong dependency on availability of the GitLab.com. And now my question is like, what happens if ops GitLab.net is doing upgrades and we restart Sidekey or we restart Race on GitLab.com? What state it gonna use? Like, who holds the last state in this kind of highly distributed architecture? I think like whatever we choose, like the microservice written in the Go, probably, because it would be the easiest and the most performant. It could be using some kind of cache, or it could hold this kind of persistent state, would always have the latest state of the feature flags. It would be so small that it would be fast to respond to Unleash API. And it would be able to multiplex, but it would be resilient to like the temporary unavailability of the feature flags API. And then like the concern whether we are pooling or whether we are pooling POP's WebSocket, long pooling, how it's being maintained, I think it's not really like the problem. It's not really like the problem that we fire 2,000 requests per 15 seconds if we are serving cache data. The problem is if we have to generate all this data over and over and over and over, then it's like very not performant. But like this microservice, since it would be living separately to GitLab, could be like managed by the ops team and could provide all the feature flags, basically, in kind of cached form. So I think like my main goals, like the pooling is very terrible, but like pooling from the locally highly optimized service is not that terrible anymore because like the cost per request is very minimal because you are mostly serving cache data. But the second aspect is like the Flipper today give us resiliency. Like the data from the Flipper, they are stored in the database, the same database that GitLab is serving data from. Which means that like if database is unavailable, GitLab will not function as well. But what happens if your storage for the feature flag is not unavailable? It's unavailable. It doesn't mean that like your service is unavailable too. It kind of builds a very strong dependency on the ops.gitlab.net. And I would say this should be like the only answer. Like you want to ensure that like you have consistent feature flags across all nodes. I mean the consistent configuration across all nodes. But you also want to be sure that the lack of the feature flags API doesn't cause you an outage. And my biggest worry is about like the strong dependency on ops.gitlab.net, because the amount of the requests, probably we could handle that better or worse. It's twice amount, but probably it would work if they are pretty like fairly simple. So initially it could work, but Flipper has completely different resiliency approach that we don't currently support with the Unleash. And coincidentally, the resiliency we could solve or unleash by solving performance problem as well, by making this more local to your installation. So these are my random thoughts. It's kind of like my overall thinking is like, we may solve log pooling, we may solve WebSockets, but we're not gonna solve in that model resiliency. And I think that this is like the most important aspect to cover with the feature, that like that application can function in fully distributed architecture when the feature flags API is not functioning for various reasons. They're gonna be an outage. They're gonna make ops.gitlab.net down or for maintenance, and everything gonna explode. And if we now make gitlab.com strongly dependent on ops.gitlab.net, it's gonna be very bad for the stability of the whole system.
So if I understand correctly, the client libraries for Unleash have some sort of caching mechanism. So even if the API for that they're calling to get, you know, a refreshed state of what the flags are, they will still continue to use whatever internal state that they have in memory.
So like the client libraries, like persistence of the state, they implement differently, but like there is like the structural difference between client libraries and the Flipper. Flipper allows you to model like the common state that you use, the shared state. Mm-hmm. But basically, Unleash clients, as the last time I saw, they rather store their state individually, really. So like if you have 100 nodes, each of these 100 nodes gonna have their own state.
Yeah, so like actually it purges the file, the backup file into your own instance. So like we need file storage, and like it purges into like temp/temp/ whatever place. And this file could be gone anytime if, for example, in cloud native architecture, it's risky to rely on this file. I would say that, like, rely on this
Yes,
locally cached file.
It's super risky because like each redeploy of the application in cloud native results in completely new workspace that you're working on, and like you lack this kind of cache data. So it's like, I mean, like persisting the cache as a file in the ephemeral container. It's like it's subject to be broken, really.
So is there anything like, I mean, I think from the, I'm trying to reconcile, like, I think we're kind of on, like, you and I may be talking about sort of like a similar path of the, like, it may not be Flipper, it may not be Unleash, but in order to do this properly and to do this in like the best possible way for ourselves and for our customers, that it needs to be potentially something that we like, maybe we take some from Unleash and some from Flipper, some ideas, but we put them, we own the solution, and it's not just something off the shelf, right? Like, here's this microservice that we are going to build to manage and maintain all of these, the feature flags for ourselves internally and for external customers through the same solution, but here it is as a standalone separate thing that maybe, you were talking before about writing it in Go or something else, but like, it seems like, while I think I agree, and I think I'm like thinking that is like maybe the end state. I'm wondering if that seems like a year away, right? It seems like a long time to get to that place. I'm wondering if there's what we can do incrementally to get ourselves to, from here, into whatever the next stage is, so we can see more internal customers being able to use Unleash or be able to use feature flags in the way that is like the way the Unleash implementation is, or something along those lines.
I agree with Chase. I think we need to find something iteratively. And I have another general question. So this isn't the first time that we're looking at some open source solution and embedding it into GitLab. What have we done before? We don't own Flipper as well. So my question is, like, what have we done for other integrations? I mean, we've done integration with Prometheus, we've done integration with other things. How do we bring them on board and solve these issues as well?
We very rarely decide to fork and start maintaining by ourselves.
Okay.
It's not our default path, because it is it requires different competencies, and it takes a lot of attention. For example, we could maybe align Unleash to behave more as a flipper in the architecture that provides this kind of caching layer and the shared state. But now we kind of talk about spreading that across all platforms. Would we fork again? Would we fork the framework for each platform? Would we focus on the single one? Would we be the one maintaining? Would we be the one upstreaming that? Would they want this to be upstreamed? So I guess there is a lot of unknowns, really, like how to handle that. And like we, at least like in the other parts, we very rarely like decide to do it. We may decide to contribute like very small additions, but we don't really like kind of do a structural improvements, because this would be a kind of structural improvement that kind of changes the whole philosophy of how the how the library works, basically, or like how it interfaces with the external system.
I understand. So a question that I have is, if we do go the way that Chase had mentioned and do it iteratively, take Unleash as it is today, and then we, and I think we discussed this also when we were trying to do the minimal Ruby client, and we kind of went off that path. Make some kind of separate area, separate server, if you want to think about it like that, that will do the API calls. Could be the architecture that we recommend self-managed users as well as ourselves while we learn that. So that could be managed by ops or someone else. And then having it not part of the GitLab solution itself would mean that any dependencies on this server or on that server wouldn't happen in case something goes down. Does that make any sense?
Yes, I'm just kind of thinking about different aspects because there is many sites, and I think Shinya very nicely described in the issue, like the different layers that we have in our internal usage of the feature flags in terms of like the process and management, and like how it offers Unleash and what it offers Unleash. There is also, in any case, there is also one other important aspect to remember, like whatever we do with the feature flags dogfooding, and we change that internally how we use feature flags. I mean, it could be Unleash, Flipper, or whatever. It has to include support for the on-premise installations, because this is like the work of doing. Like we ship the feature flag, and our customers and our support team extensively use the feature flags to disable features that may be broken or not broken. The current architecture of the Unleash doesn't offer any of those, really. I mean, it could probably offer if you deploy the Unleash server, like maybe somewhere in your infrastructure, but it's not like built-in solution as it is today. It kind of requires an additional component. So I think it's kind of important to have this constraint on back of our minds, how we approach it, because it's very limiting constraint on how we can move with the dogfooding. It's kind of my random notes, like to ensure that like we remember about it as well. Because like honestly, like we could probably start using ops.gitlab.net or with the Unleash. We just would change maybe completely the feature flags engine to be Unleash. Knowing these the deficiencies about like what happens if API server is unavailable, knowing this deficiency about the cloud native and the feature flag state. But how this affects like our on-premise customers, that they are using the same GitLab, and they need to have a way to talk with these flags.
I think we do, it is supported for self-managed today, and it is basically using the Unleash server libraries as well. I'm not even sure that we have a manual telling the customers what to do. We probably rely on Unleash itself. And when Amy was working on this, I think she had mentioned using a separate server entirely for it.
But like separate server in what context? Of gitlab.com or something different?
Yes, well, for self-managed, I mean, they don't have the API server responding to the requests on the same server that GitLab is there. They have one server where GitLab is installed, self-managed, right? It's some machine on the side, and they have a separate server for managing the API request itself.
For the feature flags, like Unleash server or GitLab feature flags?
they use Unleash. They manage the flag themselves through GitLab, but the code, the code is stored in GitLab, source control and everything. But the URL of which the clients ask for the flags themselves is like on a different server.
Yes, but like we would likely not do it for the on-premise customers.
Is that a requirement that the on-premise customers only have to boot up one instance?
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that whatever we do with the dogfooding, we should aim to have like the single solution or like the single framework, and it kind of like implies that we need to support GitLab.com, staging GitLab.com, dev-GitLab.org, our QA environments, and our on-premise customers to be able to toggle feature flags. Because this is what we are doing, our customers are doing, using documentation. This is what our support team is doing to overcome some problems. And it's also like to add a little more complication, like in the long term, like these people may have on the Flipper some configuration today. If we would switch over, we would have to somehow migrate that as well into new system to retain the same behavior. So why? So I'm kind of having random question. Like we had this discussion about providing the Flipper compatible API. What did happen with that?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happened with it. We're kind of trying to figure out, where to put our efforts right now, because on the one hand, we have spent months now developing Unleash, and yet we're having problems convincing our own developers to use it. So that's where we're at right now. I'm not sure yet that I want to add Flipper into the solution yet. I would like to know that we checked all our possibilities in order to support what we already developed before moving on to a different solution. It could be that we'll get to that Unleash is not performant and we need to switch to something else, but I'm not sure we're there yet. I understand the concern that we don't own the code and that we need to figure it out and manage the architecture, but I think we need to do that anyway, regardless of if it's Unleash or if it's Flipper or a GitLab proprietary feature flag. I think at the end of the day, all the feature flags are basically API requests, and we need to figure out how to manage that in scale and with resiliency and performance.
Because like at least the Flipper and the architecture and the flexibility of the Flipper library kind of overcomes a lot of these problems mentioned. And like my idea in the past was that maybe the easiest way, instead of reading Unleash proxy, and like because we talk only about the Unleash, it's like provide two APIs, one for Flipper, one for Unleash, and basically like make our feature work well with the both APIs. Then this is really like from the, then we don't really have the problem with the API calls, probably also with the resiliency that much. There is maybe slightly probably there is something that we should like improve the expiry times of the flags, but Flipper, it has multiple layers of caching data, and it can use the shared cache. It's something that we use today as well, and something that probably would be pretty, it uses the same pooling mechanism, but the frequency of doing pooling is significantly lower due to the caching in the framework that you can very easily use and that we are using today, in fact.
Hmm.
Chase, did you want to mention
I
something?
I had like a reaction to that, and then I just started ruminating on those ideas. I worry about like making some sort of like middle road there about or not middle road, but like some sort of bridging between the two, if that's like how long term a solution that might be. And that's fine for like the short term if that's how we get to um, a place where more people can use this internally and vet the solution, then maybe that's fine. I mean, like and it's like the same thing if we went the other way, right? If Flipper has all like the performance gains and all the things that we need, it just lacks all of this client support. But we can then create a second adapter or some other HTTP layer to Flipper that then we can build out all of the client libraries in such a way that works with that solution. Great. Like, but then but then it's the same thing we talked about before, where we're owning that solution, and those client libraries are like, then this is what you now must use. You must migrate away from using this library to this library, and how like what that transition looks like, and how can we make that happen, and what level of effort are we willing to expend to get there, right? I think I think that is probably part of this is the difficult thing, at least for me, is like, well, yes. It's like, yes to this way, yes to this way, sure. But like, I think to Arit's point before, like, are we there yet? Are we willing to abandon 6 months worth of work or longer to like do an about face and go a different direction and rebuild from a different place? I'm not sure that we're all willing to do that yet.
I think that, and we're really out of time and I really need to go, but I think that we need to figure out the architecture regardless of what the engine is for Frag itself. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about a SaaS solution, we need to serve many, many, many client requests, timed up by the amount of projects and the amount of developers and environments that we serve today. And it's a very big number. So I am very concerned about performance, and I think we need to nail that down, regardless of Flipper, Unleash, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Again, we need to find out where is the right place to put it in the product, who needs to manage it, and what are the requirements for that. So I think that's the key in any case.
Yep, I think those are good. That's a good closing thought to leave on to come back and contribute to that issue from that frame. Yeah.
So like at any rate, I think we're not gonna avoid building some kind of proxy or using some kind of proxy. Mm-hmm. We don't rate limit today, but likely we should rate limit amount of the API calls that you can perform in some kind of window and instruct our customers, this is the rate limit. If you want to use more requests, you have to use this proxy that we are providing and very nicely like maintaining for you, and it's gonna allow you to use like your feature flags kind of unlimited. And like then this interface between this microservice that the customer may be deploying somewhere, but maybe customer doesn't need to deploy this microservice yet because they are only having 2 application nodes and it's good enough for testing. It's really up to them, but they have like the tools to make it performant. And we have very minimal maintenance from our side because we use the same API as we have. We just provide something that it's a caching layer that it's not so susceptible to rate limits because we don't have problem with the rate limits because we multiplex requests basically by that proxy service. So I think like it's unavoidable like to have something in between to make it performant, like to installations having a dozen nodes, basically. We're not gonna be able to like serve, let's say, 100 requests from one client per 60 seconds. It's like, it's not feasible from the CPU time, database time, anything else. But on the other hand, as rewriting that into Go, I'm not really convinced that this makes a lot of sense. It seems like the business logic is easier if it's in the Ruby, but also like what we are serving is not highly changing information. So, and there is pretty big markup price that we pay on serving from the race, which we don't really have to. There is something like feature aware and can cache that efficiently. I mean, this is exactly what we do with Flipper, right? We have three layers of the caching between engine. I mean, you like, we have 3 layers between you requesting a feature flag and us checking the database, which is like the most expensive operation to perform. And like what I'm really saying, it doesn't differ at all from that. It's just moves that away into slightly different component that I hopefully would make it, let's say, fairly easy to maintain, because it would be coherent for all frameworks for different languages that we support, but we do not maintain them, where we kind of provide the API on the server side. So it's kind of my thoughts about that, really.
Great, thank you. I agree. I think we need to start with proxy of some sort and figure that out and then go from there. Thank you, everyone. I think this was actually a really productive meeting, even though we had no agenda items and no external visitors, but I think this was very important to talk through. So I want to thank you, everyone, for their time.
Sure thing. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day.